Joining us now for a closer look at the issue is Dr. Ross Tapsell, Senior Lecturer at the Department of Gender, Media and Culture, Director from the ANU Malaysia Institute at the Australian National University. Dr. Tapsell, first off, how has social media evolved as a tool for politicians amid the pandemic?
Yes, social media has always been important for a Malaysian election, dating back to the blogs of the late 1990s through to social media, Facebook and Twitter campaigning in 2013. And then 2018, of course, WhatsApp campaigning was a really big part of spreading messages, particularly about corruption under a Najib government. This election, we're really looking much more at live video content. That seems to be what every candidate is focusing on. Some of them have got 4 or 5 staffers there, all doing some form of video on different platforms, with the belief, on the one hand, that this is a much more open and transparent election than Malaysia has ever seen before, but also because, as your clip showed, young voters are very much engaged with TikTok, with Instagram, and with Facebook Live, where video content is increasingly a massive part of their social media engagement.
Doctor, like you mentioned, TikTok this time around is emerging as the tool to get the youth vote. In GE15, it was Facebook. But, at the end of the day, politicians just need to be where the eyeballs are. So, in your opinion, who's doing the best job so far this GE?
Well, it's not necessarily that it's all about TikTok, because the video content sometimes can start on TikTok, then it can go viral on Twitter, or it can get spread around WhatsApp groups. Facebook still remains incredibly important in the Malaysian social media constituencies, particularly amongst the Malay language groups. And so we are actually looking at a more polarized social media space for Malaysia. You do have mid to older generation Malay language speaking Malaysians, particularly outside of the main cities, who are fully engaged with Facebook and also, to a lesser extent, WhatsApp. For these kind of content. On the other hand, you have a huge percentage of urban, young, multilingual voting for the first time, who are very much engaged with TikTok, but also Instagram. So and they might not be necessarily Malay language speakers. So you are actually looking at a more polarized election. And so in that sense, I think the medium is the message, and we might see a very polarized election campaign response, where half the country thinks that some of the PN, BN voters are doing a great job on social media, and the other half thinks Pakatan Harapan and Muda is doing a superb job on their social media platforms.
And Dr. Tapsell, political literacy among youth especially is a concern this time round. And based on what you're seeing, what is the role of social media in enhancing this, or are there any missed opportunities? Could this get young people to care and to vote?
Part of the issue, I think, is that the lowering the voting age to 18-21 has ultimately been a wonderful thing for Malaysian democracy. Part of the problem is informing those groups of people first how to vote, particularly if they're not in their home constituencies, what kind of information should they be seeking out, and also why does their vote matter? And some of the parties are trying to engage with youth voters in this space. But I think some of the NGOs and governments could have done a better job of really trying to engage young voters as to why their vote matters and what they should be looking at when they vote, policy platforms and so on. And one of the problems, of course, with this election in Malaysia is that it was called very abruptly, and it was called, during a flood season, and where many people are unsure whether they can get back to their home constituencies. So we are looking at a lower voter turnout percentage-wise than we saw in previous elections. Having said that, there is a lot of new engagement and there is a lot of diverse choices. And so people are weighing up the options, and that's ultimately a good thing.
And Doctor, misinformation and disinformation, these are real problems that come with social media content because it moves and it spreads very quickly. Are there any alarm bells this campaign season? What have you observed that might worry you?
Part of the problem is old, where we do see digital labour being mobilised in order to, I guess, attack certain candidates or spread certain forms of misinformation. Cyber troopers being the common term that people use in Malaysia, but trolls in the Philippines or buzzers in Indonesia are now a standard practice. So it's about digital labour campaigning. Another problem, of course, is that when some of the parties don't actually stand for a clear policy platform and all they're really fighting about is who should be prime minister, that can lead to a whole range of alternative narratives that can, quote, go viral during an election campaign because people aren't talking about some of the key policy issues that an election should ideally be discussing, the role of the economy, who's got better policies in the next 5 years for Malaysia. And so certain scare tactics around communism, around non-Malays versus Malays can easily get blown out online.
Doctor, one last quick question. For those Malaysians who are going to vote this weekend, and we get all these messages forwarded to us from friends or family umpteen times a day, how do we better manage digital literacy?
Yeah, so sometimes being part of a wider community online can be a good thing because it does make you question, what is being sent around and what isn't and what might be sent for political purposes. But ultimately, it's really important, I think, to not accept every WhatsApp message that comes through as being fact. In particular, some of the things that look real, like a real news site, or sometimes a real polling data set that has gone viral recently, or sometimes an influencer who looks really legitimate, they actually might all be created by a political party for the campaign. And so it's important to always reflect on the material that we receive and ultimately go back to the sort of manifestos, ideally, that these parties are putting out and listening to the politicians themselves to see whether those ideas align with your ideals.
All right, Doctor, thank you very much. Dr. Ross Tapsell, Senior Lecturer at the Department of Gender, Media and Culture and Director at the ANU Malaysia Institute at the Australian National University.